right, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. I hope you all are fed and nourished, maybe even got to put your feet in the grass a little bit. We're about to get started with our next speaker, Dr. James Fadiman. I know that I've been very excited to hear from him today. I'm a big fan. I'm going to let Joseph do the introduction on this one because if I'm a big fan, Joseph's an even bigger fan. And so I'm going to let him fanboy, but here you go.
I'm gonna use this one here. Keep that. Okay, yeah. So she gave it up. I'm a fanboy. So
Great.
So Jim, thank you so much for being here. This is great, and it's amazing that we're getting everybody back here from lunch. Thank you for doing that for us. Motivating. I'm going to read a little bit of an intro, and I'll let you fill in your own whatever you want to add to it.
Okay.
For those that don't know, this is a pretty knowing crowd, right? So, but just for the formality, we will be talking to Dr. James Fadiman, known as the father of microdosing. Dr. James Fadiman has been a leading voice in psychedelic research for over 60 years. That's 60. So you've been doing this since before it was cool. You've been doing it since before it was cool, when it was originally cool. A pioneering psychiatrist, psychologist, and author of the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. Jim was part of the original wave of scientific research into psychedelics in the 1960s. In recent years, he has been spearheading groundbreaking citizen science studies on microdosing. Microdosing is lower sub-threshold doses of psychedelics used for the healing and wellness of the mind and body. And he has compiled that research into a book, Microdosing for Health, Healing, and Enhanced Performance, along with his co-author, Jordan Gruber. And that book is just a small part of an entire ecosystem that now exists around microdosing, including a huge effort of distributed research that we can talk about. The format of this will be an informal Q&A session. I will be moderating, starting off with some questions. And we are collecting, Jim, questions from the audience as well, and I will be giving those to you as well.
Great.
Anything you'd like to add for your own introduction?
Only that it's just remarkable that you're all doing what you're doing, and I'm just so happily impressed, and I'm very glad to be part of it. Jessica is someone I've known for several years, and I'm one of her many fans. And so when she invited me, I couldn't say yes fast enough.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and of course, I'm a fan of Jess as well. And Jess has gained some new friends, I'm sure, and some new fans today. So we were both crying and angry with her today, right? Pitchforks and torches. Okay, so I would like to first address where we are. We are in Bentonville, Arkansas. We are in the heartland. We are in a public library, and that was an intentional choice to be in a neutral civic space where we're public, we're above ground, we're having this conversation. But we do want to recognize that we're not in Menlo Park, we're not in California, we're not in places where this has been more accepted and the conversation has been more acceptable for so long. And so there's still some fear and danger around talking about this. And doing that, what do you say to us in this part of the country? How can we engage with psychedelics and microdosing and this whole topic, and with that fear and that looming threat, I suppose?
Well, you certainly started with a tough one.
You told me to be tough, and right up.
That's true. Okay. Well, one of the reasons that I'm talking about microdosing is because it doesn't threaten anybody. It's safe, it's low cost, you don't need technical staff, and it isn't exciting. Everything you've been told and learned about high doses, transformational psychosis, whatever it is, spiritual breakthroughs, changes in basic belief systems, none of that. Best definition of microdosing is everything you know about high doses don't apply. So just imagine that there's a substance with very, very few physical effects at all that seems to improve general health and improve skills, improve kind of coordination and cognitive stuff. And that it's growing probably in somebody's backyard who's sitting here right now because psilocybin mushrooms grow on all 5 continents. There's 185 different species, and nature might have some reason for doing that. So I hope that will, and if anything that you're disturbed about with psychedelics, you'll find is actually about high doses, which we won't be talking about today. And again, the reason that there's a lot of medical support and so forth is high doses are amazing,
Yeah.
and they aren't something that you do on your own.
Or not wisely doing your own.
Well, right.
So this next question then is about, we have, a lot of us here have a spiritual connection to these medicines and these plants. And part of that connection is the history and the cultures from which they came, and that they've been used medicinally and therapeutically and for so long. What evidence do we have of them being used in this way as microdosing or non-macro doses from those histories?
Well, again, you have to have two groups. One is all the anthropologists that write up about all these fantastic rituals and exciting moments using psychedelics. And ibogaine takes 36 hours and is part of a 3-day ritual in Gabon, for example. They don't ask about microdoses usually. However, let's go back to that incredible 36 hours ibogaine. One of my friends, who's a filmmaker, rather famous filmmaker, was in Gabon, and she said, "Do you use this for anything else except for these incredibly important breakthrough parts of a person's life?" And they said, "Oh, sure." Nobody asked. "Oh, what do you use them for?" "Oh, hunting." "Why would you use them?" And we use only a little dose. "Why do you use them for hunting?" "Well, they increase you can see better. They increase visual acuity. You can see farther. And also, you can run longer. It just gives you more endurance. And you shoot better because you have better coordination. So that's why we use it for hunting." "Oh, you use it for anything else?" "Oh, yeah, it's good for sex." "Oh."
Okay.
So it's another world. It's a useful thing that is found in most cultures that use mushrooms, and most cultures that have mushrooms available have used them. Um, the use of psychedelic mushrooms for whatever goes back a minimum of 9,000 years. So the fact that American medical science is discovering it is kind of they're the last people at the table.
Yeah. Well,
But they have new interests, and we're doing it differently than other indigenous groups, assuming that since we live here in this country, that we've become indigenous. So we have our own rituals and our own ways.
Jim, you had me at sex, just to be clear.
Yeah. Did I mention sex?
And also this whole room. So, yeah. I hope you can hear feedback from the audience.
Yes, I can. I can at least they are. Oh, thank you, audience. Thank you.
Let's see if I can it's going to be upside down.
Okay. Oh, wow, there you are. Okay. Clearly, as you said, this is an informed audience. Hello.
Oh, yeah. They're an informed audience. And hopefully some others as well, that are becoming informed. Okay, so this next question is going to come from me being a former skeptic of microdosing. And I have, in the past, I have used what I would call mini dosing very successfully for myself, which is not sub a threshold. It's above the threshold, but below a therapeutic dose. And I felt that was very useful for my own therapeutic and mental health. Was I taking too much? Or is there space for that?
Well, when someone says, "I've been using it very successfully," am I supposed to say, "No, you've been endangering yourself and your liver has 5 months to live"? Okay, not likely. Okay. By the way, LSD in its high doses and psilocybin in its high doses are among, this is not my finding, this is a quote from the psychopharmacologist, among the safest drugs out there.
Mm-hmm.
It is extraordinarily difficult to harm yourself with a psychedelic. People have done it, but usually by driving into a tree while using too much. But they can do that with alcohol and nobody gets excited. So what you were using it is in a way that's unusual because you had to stop what you were doing with your life, with your day, and you had to
Yeah.
take the space and you had to be quiet and you had to be alone, perhaps. You probably had music. It was a whole little ritual that you did, and that's a small version of what higher dose rituals do.
Yeah.
That it was helpful. All psychedelics are anti-inflammatories, which means they reduce inflammation, which means they affect the whole body and all systems. Microdoses have particular advantages in that they improve mental functioning on top of whatever the physiological changes are. And if you go above a microdose, you're probably happier, but you're not more focused.
Yeah, I did try to do a work meeting once on that dose. And at first I felt an extra level of creativity, but halfway through the meeting, I didn't give a shit.
Actually, that's beautiful. I may quote you because what I have said in the past to a similar question is somebody was microdosing very successfully in their lives, and they were in sales in some company, and they thought, as any of us do, is if 10 is good, 20 must be better.
Yeah.
You know, we all know if you get the bigger size of candy bar, that's more candy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, so he went to the sales meeting with 20, and he was enjoying the sales meeting, and then he had a little breakthrough, which is, I don't care about this product. And he sat there quietly, and then he thought, I don't even care about sales. And then he did the very smart thing is he went home.
Yeah.
And he did not do that again. Okay, because what you need to do, it's like anything else, you want the right dose for the right experience.
Yeah.
And a little too much gives you some of what you want, but it also gives you an extra burden. So I I recommend that the reason that we put out a book that has a kind of conventional boring cover of how many words will Google pick up on this.
Yeah.
But basically, what we're saying, this is for people who are healthy and who want to improve their skills, physical skills, mental skills. It's for people who have physical problems, and that's really a breakthrough because psychedelics are not used almost anywhere else for physical problems, and for mental issues.
Mhm.
I mean, depression, although I can't see you, Joe does. And how many of you have used antidepressants or know someone who has? Okay, and there's probably not a
Okay.
dry hand in the house.
No, it was 95%.
Even the people who sell you those drugs acknowledge in their own writings that 30% of people get no benefit at all. Okay, so if they're strictly physiological, something's weird. Okay, so SSRIs do work for some people. They make unpleasant parts of your life work better. You feel less sad. Now, the problem that a lot of people and some of you in the audience know is you not only feel less sad, you feel less everything. The comment is I'm not as depressed, but I'm also a zombie. Nothing matters. When people microdose for depression, they have the similar effect, which is less sadness, but they have an additional shift. They have more positive feelings. They have more gladness. So while if you're successful with SSRIs, you say, well, I'm not as depressed, but the world still sucks. With microdosing, and this is the most common phrase we get, I'm back. I'm back to feeling the way I did before I became depressed. And people who use microdoses are only the people who failed with SSRIs.
Yeah.
So those are people, there's a terrible term called treatment resistant, like it's your fault.
Mhm.
Instead of the fact is we didn't have anything that helped you. It's our fault.
Yeah.
So it's a different experience because when you're improving the whole system, naturally, the first thing you notice is you feel better. And we have areas like chronic pain where people either will have less pain, which is terrific, without the opioids, terrific, or they will say, well, actually, the amount of pain is the same, but I'm not identifying the same way, meaning you've moved from being, I'm in pain, to my leg hurts like crazy.
Mhm.
And that's a shift where you can manage very differently if you're not if you're not the pain. And that's so microdosing has those in that particular area, it goes in two directions. With most physical conditions, you just see simple improvement. For instance, migraines, terrible. Um, you if you're microdosing, what we've found in this couple of hundred cases here, um, you don't lose having migraines, but you do have them maybe 10% as much. So you are down 90%. And that's a huge improvement. And again, you're not on meds that have side effects that will also harm you. And let me just make a little aside here. Side effects is one of the smartest marketing terms ever invented. You know what I'll give you what it means. It means effects.
Yeah.
So if you ever when you get a medication from the pharmacy, there's that little teeny bit of folded paper that you can't read because it's also an 8-point type. Don't read it. What it has to say is all the things that actually will harm you if you take this drug, all the quote side effects, all the dangers. And then it usually has and the only thing in bold in the whole thing says, if you miss a dose, and then it gives you this kind of doom projection that if you don't get a dose back into you fast, your life is going to be never the same. Um, that's a strong substance, and it's symptom specific. Most pharmaceuticals are as symptom specific. Microdose is more in the group of things that are good for you. And we have a wonderful professor in England who was the drug czar who said, when I look at microdosing and I look at all these things that people like Fadiman say it helps, I'm naturally suspicious. Okay. And if you've been on Instagram and you asked anything healthy and you then got 800 different remedies that only this one company has ever discovered, and it's found by a Nepalese doctor who is 85 and lives on an island and is only to this company, and so forth, it makes you suspicious. Well, that's if you're in the right, if you're in a particular mindset, which is pharmaceuticals, which is symptom specific. But if I say to you, well, nothing's good for everybody, and you would say, yeah, nothing's good for everybody. Then I say, how about sleep? Well, that's good for everybody. How about improving your diet? Well, that's good for everybody. How about having better relationships? Well, that's good for everybody. So there's a category of things that are good for everybody, and vitamins actually fit into that category. Vitamin D is good for you. Get it from the sun, terrific. Get it from a pill, not quite as good. Don't get it, you're in trouble. So there are things that are just good for you, for everybody.
Yeah.
Microdosing is closer to that because it improves the health of the system. Some days when you get out of bed and you feel like, I'm really glad to see the day, that's what people report when they shift to microdosing.
So I'm going to, one of my wife's favorite phrases that I say, and you can tell by that voice, it's not her favorite phrase, is, and I don't say it anymore. I've learned my lesson, but I used to say citation needed when she makes a claim. And so with the benefits of microdosing, let's talk about the evidence. Where is
Okay.
it?
Yep. Well, there are two kinds of evidence. There's primary evidence, which is real world experience. The final test of anything, especially a medication, is not does it work on mice, not does it work on monkeys, not does it work in a very, very contrived laboratory condition, not does it even work in a clinic where the people who are making the medicine are all begging it to work. It only works when your physician says, I got this last week, it's kind of new, but I think it might help you. Why don't you try it? When that works, that's called real world evidence. So real world evidence is where we start, which is people come and write us letters about, say, migraines. And then we tell researchers who are interested in migraines, there's something here that you might be interested in. So research comes second.
Yeah.
And research is very contrived, very remarkably rigid. and for pharmaceuticals and or anything that goes in your mouth,
Yeah.
the Food and Drug Administration has a set of rules because for most substances made by pharmaceutical companies, they want to save you from something, but mainly they want to make a large profit. So the rules are very strict. And one of them is a double-blind experiment where you and the people in the room and the people who gave it to you, nobody knows whether you got the actual substance or what's called a placebo. Placebo, by the way, doesn't mean it's bad for you or that it's nothing. It means it's your natural healing response. And for every substance, from bottled air to real substances, if you're told it'll help you, you will feel a little better, especially if the person who tells you has a medical degree or a white coat that looks like a medical degree. And literally, we've done this research, and the more you look special, the more it works better. Okay? Um, so we're dealing in a funny world, which it isn't objective. But what we find with microdoses is in study after study, we're verifying what the real world evidence gives us. But those studies don't happen unless there's enough real world evidence piled up. So, for instance, 3 years ago, I started working with someone who has multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis, basically, the sheath around the nerves begins to fray and your system doesn't work. Multiple sclerosis is one of the conditions where you only get worse. There's a stage called stage 1 where you have a drop somehow in functioning and you recover to the old level. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is when you drop, you don't recover. And that's when you're older. So it only goes in one direction. So I was working with a woman for like 3 years. She started with 20 years of multiple sclerosis. So she was already well into certainly phase 1. And she made improvements in her physical health, particularly chronic headaches she'd had since childhood when she microdosed. Multiple sclerosis, other symptoms unchanged, but it transformed her from a headache pain patient to a person. In the next year, what she said is she was microdosing and a lot of her mental health improved. She said, you can't have multiple sclerosis for 20 years without having mental problems. Okay. And the third year, she said, and this is what's important, I'm walking more. Now, that's miracle talk in the multiple sclerosis world.
Mhm.
And what I loved is she said, you know how I know? I said, how do you know? She said, I have my Apple phone and I look at those steps every day. I thought, that's science.
Mhm.
So there is now some research going on with for multiple sclerosis with psychedelics. That's how it works. And so most of the science that's come in, if they're looking in a way that makes sense, they tend to, not surprisingly, show what the, kind of what the real world already knows. But they do it in a way that works for them and also works for the kind of pharmaceutical legal model.
Mhm.
So when we started writing this book, we would say, quoting most science reporters, there's very little formal research on microdosing. So that was in our first draft. In our last draft, we say at least half of all the research ever done on microdosing has happened while we've been writing this book. And I was squeezing in one of the really important pieces of research after we'd closed the manuscript. And my co-author was mad at me and my editor was mad at me. And I squeezed it in after midnight one night that definitely showed that if you take the right amount, you have cognitive improvement. If you take a little bit more, you're out of kind of the sweet space and those effects go away. So a little bit more moves you out of microdosing into what you're calling a mini dose. And
Yeah.
so we have really hard science now at some of the basics, and we have a good idea of why it helps so many conditions. And we don't have a good reason why people shouldn't be allowed to improve their own health in a safe, inexpensive way.
Yeah. Amen.
And decriminalization, I love decriminalization. It's so clever. It says, fine, make anything illegal you want, but let's not put any budget into people just using it. If you're using it in, in a way that makes you unpleasant or dangerous or funny in the wrong place, then you're like anything else. Uh, I think what you all know is that and you all know from personal experience, is that drinking isn't illegal. And some of you know that being drunk isn't illegal. And some of you know that screaming drunk and stupid in your own home is fine. There are laws, however, called public drunkenness, which is, if you drive or if you're wandering around a shopping mall hitting on people. Um, but that is true no matter, even if you have no substances. So the general rule of decriminalization is if you're only improving your health, that shouldn't be a problem for the local authorities.
Mhm. Yeah. So you've already halfway answered it, but bringing it back to where we are here, we've been talking to police chiefs, we've been talking to members of city councils and mayors and prosecutors. Sometimes it's education, sometimes it's vibing because they already know about this stuff and they like it. But generally, there's still a lot of hesitation, a lot of slow movement. So, what is your message to those individuals that are the policymakers and the leaders of our local communities?
Well, starting from the assumption of do no harm. So here is something that does no harm, microdosing. Here is something that has benefits, and that the reason it was made illegal 40 years ago had zero medical research, zero botanical research, zero pharmacological research to have this bill happen. What happened is that President Nixon, who we all know historically had certain groups he hated, one of the groups where they didn't like the Vietnam War, a lot of us didn't like the Vietnam War, um, and he found a way to harm those groups by finding what they would normally be using and make that illegal. And that was for cannabis, and that was also for psychedelics. At the time when Schedule 1, as it's called, was created, and LSD, for example, and psilocybin were put in it, Schedule 1 says no known medical use and high possibility for addiction. Okay? At that moment, LSD was the most researched psychiatric drug in the world. I'm not talking about US, in the world. There were at least 40,000 individual reports in the scientific literature, not studies, but of individuals. So we had a lot of people who'd taken a lot of psychedelics. We had a lot of medical research. We had a lot of benefits that were reported. And therefore, what we saw was simply a political act, and we're now in another era where there are certain political acts which a lot of people say there's no science behind them, and they are personal or whatever they are. So I would say to the city council is your first commitment is the health and goodwill and good life of the people you represent. And anything that you can do that makes that more likely to happen safely and at no budget. Very important when you're talking to your elected officials. We're going to cut the costs of enforcement by only enforcing things that go wrong. So I would say that is a starting point. And then the other question is, if you would like, for example, evidence, at least on the very, very low dose, one of us will donate a copy of Fadiman's book, or we can find a lot of research that's unreadable from scientific journals, which he had to read and you don't.
Yeah, I feel like there's a correct answer between those two, but
So it's a matter again of saying, let's start from looking also, let's look at the places which have decriminalized, Ann Arbor, um, places in Washington, all of Colorado,
yeah.
um, all of Oregon, and let's look at the results. And that's really what should be looked at. And so far, decrimming seems to be a pretty much non-event in a community.
Yeah.
So thank you, counselors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you didn't invite me, but there I am.
Yeah, well, we'll put this recording on their desk here. I'm going to check in with Beth on questions from the audience.
Please.
Well, and we can. Oh, and are you comfortable taking just hot questions from people? Like,
Yeah,
real,
as long as they make it a question. A question is a sentence long. It has a little at the end, and it never starts with, "I got to tell you about my experience first."
and this is it's not a recipe on.
Right. So ask a real question, you get a real answer. Make me a phony question, I'll give you an offhand answer.
Okay, we'll start with ones that have come through. A couple.
Please.
Everybody has been so interested in what Dr. Fadiman had to say, and we didn't actually get the phones out yet, which indicates.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now I'm gonna warn you. I'm gonna ask Joe to kind of summarize your question because
Yeah,
just the way the system is and my hearing. So be clear and let's go.
okay. I'll hear the question. I'll repeat it. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't have a question yet. And
Okay. Thank you. What do you say to the 2020 Chicago 122 and 2020 study which was to the placebo?
Yes.
Thoughts, statements, which is
Yeah.
live and psilocybin.
Okay. Let's talk about Stamets stack, which is the notion of combining psilocybin with lion's mane, which improves cognitive faculties. That's generally sold on its own all over for that. Niacin is added. Niacin actually dilates the blood vessels. It means that the material that you have just swallowed will go sooner and better and faster to all parts of the body. By the way, that assumes that these molecules will affect something other than the brain, for which we're just beginning to have the collaborating research. Okay? It's very popular, especially with the millions of people who love, as I do, Paul Stamets. There is some research that says it's even better than taking a microdose by itself. So that's what he says, and there were now some research that supports that. Okay?
so
So the other question is the placebo research. I used to be against it. Now I think, how could you design a study where you wouldn't get any results? That's not easy with something as powerful and as potent as microdosing. Let me give you the counter. This is from Connor Murray, PhD, postdoc, UCLA, addiction specialist, who does brainwave studies. And he says, here's what we do. We get people and we either say it's going to be placebo, it's going to be LSD. And we give them 5 micrograms. And that's below the threshold for most people to notice anything. And so people guess and they guess, 50-50. Obviously it works as a double blind at that level. They then give it at about 12 micrograms and they get a lot of results on the brainwave scans. They get the same brainwaves as you get with much higher doses at lower amplitude. And they also get the improvements in cognitive functioning as measured by external tests and also subjectively. Okay? And people are guessing maybe 60-70% of the time correctly they're on a microdose. They then give 22 micrograms, and they get 100% of people know they're on the placebo vanishes, or the double blind vanishes. They also no longer do well on the cognitive test. Their report is more, it kind of feels like a little high. And it is. What it is they're getting out of the microdose space into the other space. What he says, it is no longer of any value to consider the possibility that it's simply a placebo reaction. Now, I've read those studies. I actually know I even like some of those people. And it's very impressive. But one of the ways you do it is you start with only healthy people.
Mm-hmm.
And you measure things like improved mood. They already feel good. It's really hard. Or so forth and so forth. And it is possible. Well, I know how to do it for SSRIs because The difference between the placebo event of SSRIs and their actual improvement is only a couple of percent. And if what I saw is they don't do those studies anymore with SSRIs.
You know, they just don't do them.
They don't do them because why do you want to show that something is almost as good if you don't use it?
Yeah. Yeah. So is there any hope for the double-blind placebo-controlled trial is still the gold standard?
Well, but wait. Remember the gold standards we threw out because it didn't work well. Okay. It is the gold standard. It's as bad as the gold standard. Yes. Now you were saying. I love this because I for years would say, well, it's the gold standard. And I thought, wait a moment, what the hell is the gold standard? And it turns out in 1934, we got rid of it.
We got rid of it.
But not in the pharmaceutical industry because it's as good as no, it's as good as side effects. Well, gold standard, that must be as good as my tooth cap.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yes, you were saying before I interrupted you.
Well, I'm gonna take another question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Blair.
What it's like I saw I'm sure it's like that people were indigenous, working class white people who were trans are most subject to the state's violent reaction to the drugs to take care of themselves or to try to take care of themselves. And so you've been in this for decades and seen drugs. Can you just speak more to like what you can say to people who are especially subject to the violence of the government?
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously we're going way off here, but what we know, this is now Paul Stamets who says it nice best, people who use mushrooms are nicer. That's really a very strong statement about particularly us in this country today. People who use high doses report better relationships with people they know and that they don't know. They become less fixated on their prior assumptions. They're more flexible. One of the things that the 60s were accused of loving everybody, not a bad trait.
So
What we also know that people who are depressed or oppressed benefit from being healthier and saner. There's nothing says that we can't help each other feel better about each other. And we don't start with the people we hate the most. We start with the people we don't like quite as much. And we notice that if I really think of my next door neighbor who is such an a-hole, but he lives alone and he's lost his kids and it isn't like he's a bad person. He's in a bad place. And of course he behaves badly. And I think what's going to happen if I drop a bunch of cookies on his doorstep? So we have hundreds of these stories of by going to the people that you don't like and finding out more about them, you may not want to spend time with them, but you'll not assume that their badness is like their major trait.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where we are. And in a larger sense, what we know, and now we've got, actually, you should know that while you think there isn't much use in northern Arkansas, there is. There is all over. We have reports 6 years ago from 51 countries. We now have reports from 81 countries. So it's a world phenomenon. And let's look just at the United States, because I love these numbers. The RAND Corporation, they're not exactly your flower child group, did a study. They came up with how many people took psilocybin only, not LSD and everything else, psilocybin last year, or not 2023. 8 million people. Woo. And I thought, well, that's a big number. And then the thing that blew me away is, because I'm interested in microdosing, how many of those people were microdosing? 4 million. So microdosing is extremely available and used around the country. And what we're simply doing is adding on, for you people, we're adding the possibility that you can not worry about it because it should be decriminalized, which also means only if you behave well, which is fair. and that it's just beneficial
Mhm.
and it's all around. And if you want people who are growing mushrooms, I've been told you need at least one drawer in your dresser or a shelf in your closet, or you buy a what's called a grow kit online. So it's quote illegal, but it's more and more widely available. And also there are hundreds of little underground companies who are selling very often very good material in incredibly gorgeous, pretty wrappings, so that you think it's a high tone perfume. So
For,
there we are.
for the record, all of us here will be waiting for decriminalization and legalization before we do that here. So okay. We're gonna take one more question
Sure.
and then and go a little bit over a couple minutes if that's okay. Oh yeah. So you can come over here and read it too. So
We had several, so but are there any well-known traditional religious leaders
Mm.
who have, sorry, let me click on this, who have come out in favor of psilocybin? As
Sure.
a Christian, I'm in a difficult position incorporating my love of mushrooms with my Christian ethos with regards to discussing its specific spiritual benefits to my church friends.
Well, I think the question was any religious people or groups, right?
was specifically Christianity. So
Yeah.
or traditional
Traditional religious leaders, so.
traditional religious leaders.
Well, remember Christianity. Christianity is kind of more like going to Whole Foods and saying, I want a vegetable. There's a lot of Christianities out there.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Christianities. There's a very successful book that says Christianity itself arose out of a mushroom group, out of a mushroom cult.
That's a tough sale.
Yeah, that's a tough sale, and I don't buy it. But what they're also saying, and it is true, that in the Holy Land there are several psychedelic plants, so that the argument is stronger for what Moses was on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, but the point that they're asking is a recent study out of Johns Hopkins took 24 or 27 professional religious leaders, almost all of them Christian, one rabbi, one Islamic imam, and gave them a high dose. They all were psychedelic naive, and they all, basically everyone, reported that they were almost all of them were stronger in what they were in their particular vision of Christianity, and they were much more tolerant of other religious positions. Now, two of the people have founded churches. I mean, one is a synagogue, one is a church, which has all of the same beliefs and writings of Christianity and Judaism, but an acceptance of psychedelics as part of being a human being.
As the sacrament.
Yeah, as the sacrament. And there are also churches springing up in amazing places, which are based on the sacrament of the psychedelic to get closer to God.
Mhm.
And they are actually winning in court because they are genuine. And I remember there's one wonderful small church where he started in his basement and now has 700 members. And what people say is, actually, I don't come for the sacrament, I come for the community, because this community is so Christian in the sense of old Christian, where we are the followers of the same divine force.
Mhm.
And remember, early Christianity, people called each other saints. Now, I think that may be because that was really nice, but I'm wondering if because people in the early church had enough spiritual event in their life, not a belief, but an event that was internal, uh, that kept them together as this incredible community. So there's nothing in Christianity that says you can't approach God in whatever way possible. And there's one religious denomination, which, as you know, has a central sacrament, which suggests that you are actually transforming, a little cookie and a little wine into divine substance.
Yeah.
And that makes you attuned to God. So that sounds, see, if we didn't already have that, that would be some kind of 60s crackpot cult.
Yeah, but we already have it.
But because we've had it for a couple of thousand years, people understand that it is symbolic, but it is symbolic of what is possible.
Mhm. Thank you. And that's
Thank you for that
thing
question.
about this. Yeah, that's a good question. That's the theme of this symposium. So I think that's a good place to end. If I can summarize, microdosing is great for sex.
Well, I think we know clearly how the city council is can get interested.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Oh, that's terrific.
I'm pulling up questions now. And most of all, Jim, you're a hero to us because you helped our friend Jessica.
Yeah.
So thank you because she is teaching us all.
Well, I long to come celebrate at the right time with you guys.
Yeah.
We're so glad. All right, we're going to sign off here and get ready for our next.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day.